Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode If You Could Hide to Kolob podcast. My name's Daniel. This is my brother Clive.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to part two. I will just mention, Daniel, we do have a lot of things that we put our podcast up on, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, anywhere you can get podcasts. But we are going to make sure we now on, because not a lot of people have access to that, put it up on our Facebook. So missionaries or anybody who doesn't have access to those other things can go onto our Facebook page and see our full episodes on there.
Okay, Clive, I don't have a quote, but I do have another story that is from the book of Joshua, which I'm so in love with right now.
Okay.
So what happens is they come off the ark and the land is split. Noah lives in the ark for a little bit. The Lord eventually tells him when he comes out, he builds an altar and his sons begin to divide the land. The book of Enoch, the book of Jubilees, the book of the Jubilees actually goes into detail about the splitting of the land. Chapter 8, if anyone's really interested.
I do have that. I'm going to follow along.
Okay, well, I'm not going to read that out.
That is also called the Little Genesis as well.
Oh, okay. That I didn't know. I'll write that in afterwards. So what happens in chapter 9, verse 14 of Jubilees, the land is split. Noah gathers all of his sons together and they make an oath. And thus the sons of Noah divided to their sons in the presence of their father Noah, and he bound all of them by an oath, invoking a curse that they sought to seize a portion which had not fallen by his lot. So he said, you've all got your lots. They're this big by this big by this big. And you are committing that you're not going to seize each other. Of course, they do a lot of seizing. Anyway, here's my interesting story. Okay, so this is from the book of Joshua, chapter 7. And to Latter-day Saints, this story, unless you are familiar with the Apocrypha, which maybe people are going to write to us and go, you guys are clowns. Of course, we've all read the Apocrypha. But anyway, I never had. So what happens is there's lots of sons. There's a lineage. There's lineage taken of Noah's sons, Japheth, Ham, and Shem, and they talk about all of their kids in here in chapter 7 of Joshua. Anyway, then they grow up. These grandkids of Noah, they grow up, and some of them are not very good. They're transgressors. The book talks about them being transgressors. This is still my story at the start, by the way. And now we learn about the garments, the skins that were made by God and given to Adam and Eve now come back into the picture, which I had no idea. And the garments of skin which God made for Adam and Eve were given to Cush. Cush is not a good person. For after the death of Adam and his wife, the garments were given to Enoch, the son of Jared. And when Enoch was taken up to God, he gave them to his son Methuselah. And at the death of Methuselah, Noah took them and brought them to the ark. And they were with him until he went out of the ark. And in their going out, Ham stole those garments from his father Noah, and he took them and hid them from his brothers. And when Ham begot his firstborn Cush, he gave him the garments in secret, and they were with Cush for many days. And then there's this crazy story, Clive, about how they went from this person to this person to this person. And in the end, they go to someone who actually strengthens himself by using the garments and actually does find some favor with the Lord. Another interesting, great story from the book of Joshua.
That is a great story. I have heard that before, and that's when, along with that story, and again, it's somewhere in my binder, where it talks about that Noah, because he didn't have the garments anymore, he decided to make some more. But instead of making them out of animal skins, he decided to make them out of wool and things like that, so to no longer have to sacrifice the animals for it, and it was made it out of wool.
Awesome. Okay, let's keep going then, Clive. We finished off last week with where did we finish off? We talked about Noah and his drunkenness and the curse. We talked about that the sons started getting, they acquired land. The land was split. We just briefly mentioned that just then as well. Mike, I actually did have a question for you, an unannounced question in chapter 10, verse 31 and 32. I'll read it out. We're in Genesis here, chapter 10, 31, 32. These are the sons of Shem, after their families, after their tongues, in their lands, after their nations. These are the families of the sons of Noah, after the generations in the nations, and they were the nations divided in the earth after the flood. So, after their families and after their tongues. So I'm going to tell you what I assume. My assumption is that from Adam up to the flood, there is one righteous, I'm going to say righteous language, an Adamic language. I'm more than happy to be wrong here. I genuinely don't know. And then when they land off the ark, the sons split the land, and then here it tells us that the sons of Shem, at least, have their own tongues in their own lands, in their own nations, their own language. Do you know more about that? Do you know anything about that? What are your thoughts on the matter?
My thoughts are similar to what we talked about, I don't know if it was last week or the week before, where the language wouldn't have been totally different like it was later on that we'll talk about. But I think that I was watching this really great show called QI, and it's really fascinating, interesting facts on there. And it did talk about that if you keep a society away for, I don't remember how long it was, but it was a surprisingly short amount of time, their language would evolve so much so that you could still understand them, but the language and the words and the way that they use different words would change so much. And so I think that's probably something similar as what happened. The language is still similar, but because they've all split off onto their own, maybe their slangs are different, or maybe their accents are different, little bits and pieces would have changed so that you could say, well, that's their tongue and that's their tongue, and the way they say things. People in America be listening to us now going, you say things that I don't understand, like crikey, and which is not a word we've ever used. But there'll be words.
Terrible example.
Yeah, but there'll be words that we use that go, that's not an American word. In fact, we watch American shows and go, well, that's not a word that we use, but we understand it.
I think that makes a bit of sense to me, because as we go into chapter 11, the first thing is, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. But it tells us that they're after their own tongues in chapter 10. So I guess there was a bit of a conflict there. But maybe that's right. Maybe there's more local dialects more than anything.
There's many, many stories about the flood. So before we get into the Tower of Babel, there's many, many stories about the flood. And I'd written down tons of different ones. And I thought, what? I'm not going to go through all the stories. There's so many. I thought I would just pick one. So there's one interesting story that comes from Australia, northwest Australia. And there's Aboriginal people tell these stories passed on. There's a story of a great father named Ngoongu, which is definitely the way they would have said it, who became angry with his children because they treated his owl so cruelly. He sent a massive flood to drown the people, and in some versions of the story, a man and his family survived in a canoe and were guided to Mount Broome, and a bird with a leaf in its mouth helped them on their journey. So the flood story, there are so many around the world. That's just one very small example, but it's interesting, isn't it, that the story of the flood is in the Bible, and there's so many passed down from generations all around the world. There's not many things in the Bible that so many people can agree on, but the flood story is one example of something that everyone says, yes, there was definitely a flood that flooded the whole world. I think that's very fascinating.
Interesting.
So let's talk about now what you just mentioned, chapter 11, and the whole earth was of one language and of one speech. That's obviously getting to the idea of the story of the Tower of Babel. Now, here's the very first thing I want to ask you. Do you say Tower of Babel or do you say Tower of Babel? And I want you to tell me why you say whichever one you say.
I say Babel, one, because Babel sounds weird. But two, I think I say Babel because I liken it to Babylon. So I say Tower of Babel, Babylon. They're not even the same, but I think that's what I say.
Okay. It's interesting. So I say Babel, and 100% I say Babel because, first of all, like your same example, Babylon,
Right.
Babel, Babylon. So that's why I say Babylon. Also, to babble, if you say this person was babbling, it's talking about their language and the way they speak. It's an incomprehensible way of speaking.
Right.
So you're babbling on. So that's why I say Tower. So I did a thing in one of my family chats that we've got. I asked all the family. I said, "Do you say Babel or do you say Babel?" And most people said Babel. And
Was
I think
was that your 7-year-olds?
No, it was on my wife's side, the family on her side. So they say Babel, Tower of Babel, like you say Tower of Babel.
Right.
I think it's Babel. But anyway, not important. I think just for this conversation, I think we'll just stick with Babel so everyone understands what we're talking about.
Clive, I just want to take you through a couple of verses. Let's get into this. So we're in Genesis chapter 11, verse 2. And it came to pass, as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. And they said one to another, "Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower whose top may reach unto heaven, and let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." This is a really, really big undertaking. This isn't just a tower here. This is let us build us a city and a tower. This is a really, really large undertaking.
This should really be, let us go and build a city. And then it should really be a whole new chapter. And now that we've built this city, and we've taken a long time to build it, and it's been a few generations, let's make sure that the Lord cannot destroy us again. And so let's also go and build a tower. That's really how it should be, how we should read. Now, the Tower of Babel, sorry, we're going to say Babel, so let me just try and get
Are we
into my
saying
head.
Babel or Babel? Are you
Well,
changing
let's
the way
just
you
say-
say it?
I definitely will always say Babel, but just for the continuity of this
Like
podcast.
you are willing to die on the hill for the word Babel.
Just for continuity, I'm going to call it Babel.
Right.
It's going to be hard to say, but I'm definitely going to try and say Babel.
You'll bring
Okay, so-
yourself down to my level.
Well, again, I watched the National Geographic about the Tower of Babel, and they kept saying Babel.
Right.
But I swear they used to say Babel. Anyway, so the Tower of Babel, right? So it's not just let's build a tower to get to heaven. That's what seems to be the idea. Let's build a tower to get to heaven. It's more than that. So we're now following the story of Nimrod. Now, Nimrod was Ham's grandson. So Ham, the son of Noah, he had a grandson. His name was Nimrod. Now, in the complete works of Josephus, it was a scholar back in the day, and he wrote a lot of things that the Bible originally had. Now, this is what it says here.
Clive, just Nimrod is the one who ends up with the garments, with Adam and Eve's garments.
Makes sense. He was a very bad person.
Bad?
Very bad. Bad.
Does he have a lot of strength?
Yes.
And because this one here says, "And the Lord delivered all the enemies of his brothers into his hands, and God prospered him from time to time in his battles, and he reigned on the earth. Therefore it became current in those days when a man ushered out those he had trained up for battle, he would say to them, like God did to Nimrod, who was a mighty hunter in the earth, and who succeeded in the battles that prevailed against his brothers."
Could have been another Nimrod. I mean, everyone has similar names. There's two Enochs. There's two.
I don't know enough about I just like reading this history. I should learn more about it. Anyway, keep going.
Well, Nimrod. So it says here now, Nimrod was who excited them to such an affront and contempt of God. He was the grandson of Ham, son of Noah. He was a bold man of great strength of hand. So that's where I get that part where he was strong. He persuaded them not to ascribe it to God, as if it was though his means that they were happy. So basically, it's not God. We've built this great city, not for God's purpose, but for me, because of me. Right? He would be revenged on God if he would have a mind to drown the world again, for that he would build a tower too high for the waters to be able to reach, and that he would avenge himself on God for destroying their forefathers. So Nimrod's gone, we've built this great city. God's not going to just try and drown us again. If he does, let's build this tower so high that if the world were to flood again, we would be saved. So it's not just let's build a tower to go and reach heaven. Let's build a tower to avoid this. So God didn't just curse them because he's like, you know what, you can't get to heaven. Boom, different languages. He's gone, no. You can't. First of all, I've said I'm not going to flood the world again. So you obviously don't believe the things I've said. Second of all, you think that you can just build a tower and, God's in heaven going, oh no, they built a tower. I'm never going to be able to flood them now.
Yeah.
They're more like mocking God going, we can beat you.
Right.
It's more than just building a tower, right? So Josephus says that he persuaded them and his government was run on tyranny. He also gradually changed the government into tyranny, seeing no other way of turning men from the fear of God. So it's just absolute wickedness now. Now he built the tower in the form of a ziggurat, which is a word that I knew but didn't quite understand until more recently. So if you did like me and you didn't know what a ziggurat was,
Well, I know what it is. Why don't you tell me and I'll tell you if you're right.
for everyone else, yeah.
Yeah.
So if you think of the pyramids, triangle shaped. But a ziggurat is the same sort of idea, except it's like a base, a square base, and then a smaller square base on top, and then a smaller square base on top, and then a smaller and smaller. And so it looks like a pyramid, but it's more like a stepped version. This is what a ziggurat is. So they've found many ziggurats all around the same area where they think this happened. And so there's a lot of ideas of where the Tower of Babel might have been. But what I think is most fascinating, so let's talk about the Tower of Babel. So they built the Tower of Babel, and they whichever way you see it, either they tried to get to heaven or they're mocking God, saying that we're going to do this. God cursed them that they will no longer speak the same language, right? And this is what it says. This is what it says in 7. Let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech. Okay, now this is the part where I'm excited about. This is the whole trying to build up to this thing.
This is the one.
This is the one.
I'm at the edge of my
from
seat.
everything you said on the last part, it really seems quite dulled down because everything you said last part, I was very excited to hear because it was really interesting. Now, we know of someone that escaped the Tower of Babel's language confinement, right?
Do we?
Those people in the Book of Mormon, well, not
Oh.
personally, but the people in the Book of Mormon,
Yeah.
they were able to manage to escape, right? The brother of Jared and his family, they were able to escape the language.
Yeah, they
Okay,
make it tight
now-
like unto a dish.
Tight like into a dish. Now, knowing that, let me read this from Josephus.
Okay.
Okay?
Well, okay, now you've got my attention.
When all men were of one language, some of them built a high tower as if they would ascend up to heaven. Now, again, it says that they're going up to heaven, but this is more of we can build it so high up to the heavens.
Right.
So we're escaping the flood so high up to the heavens. That's what it's talking about. But the gods sent a storm of wind and overthrew the tower and gave every one of his own particular language. But such of priests were saved and took sacred vessels.
Wow. That is so cool.
How amazing is that?
That is so
That
cool.
is-
Is that what you learned
that-
years ago? Is that what you're telling me?
That is what I learned at the end of the Book of Mormon after I was finished studying the brother of Jared, after we finished Enoch, and I went, I should have included that. But I'd only just discovered it, and I thought, I'm going to wait until we talk about the Tower of Babel. Tower of
That is
Babel.
so interesting.
Very, very interesting. So some priests were saved from the confounding of the languages. Now we can go on with their story because we know that.
Yeah.
And so their story continues on from the Book of Mormon. But very, very interesting. Now, I just want to mention a few things.
You know what I'm hoping? No one in our stake watches this episode because I'm going to use that in a talk and they'll go, wow, Daniel, that's so amazing.
So, okay, so the ziggurats, right? Let's talk about this. So there's some theories of where the ziggurats are and where the Tower of Babel was built. Now, I only say that because the evidence that's there to say that the Tower of Babel existed is fascinating. The same with how some people, if you look at Mount Ararat and you see that there's this sort of shape of what could have been an ark, I think that's fascinating. So there's a few places where people think the Tower of Babel might have been. So there's a place called Nimrod. Now this is in direct connection with the name Nimrod. And on there is a huge square plate in the ground. They call it the Tongue Tower, and it sort of looks melted. There's a place called Etamatanki.
Oh.
This is it's the most likely historical inspiration for the idea of a tower being built.
And are these
because
in
the bases-
Iraq, Iran areas?
Yeah, the Middle Eastern areas. If actually you can find it in your in the Book of Mormon, depending on which one you've got, where it's got the maps at the beginning.
Yes, yeah.
In there, it's sort of that area. That's they call that the footprint of Babylon because it's so big and it's in Babylon. Then the one that I think is most likely is one called Aqua Quoth. I am definitely saying that correctly.
Another perfect
So
pronunciation.
you can definitely use that in your references.
Yeah.
This was a huge ruin. This is one, I believe this is one that I saw on the National Geographic. And this is often mistaken for Babel by medieval travelers. They would see it and they would think we've found it
Wow.
because it's such a huge ziggurat-looking base. And then there's another one which is really interesting that possibly this one is in Eridu, something like that.
No one's
this
going to be able
one-
to find these places, Clive.
Never. No one. I swear he said it was here somewhere.
Did he say a Rudy? What am I doing in Spain?
There's cues in here. This one has a myth. It's one of the oldest cities and has a myth that there was languages confounded within that city.
Right.
So, anyway, really, really interesting. The Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel. Really, really fascinating. There's so much to it. And like I said, because we have this evidence of there was others that were able to escape it, then there was able, we can follow that too. And then he also goes on to talk about that after they were dispersed abroad, an account of their languages, they went out by colonies elsewhere. Each colony took possession of different lands until they spread across the whole world. So basically, I don't know how it was done, but there would have been thousands of people. And I don't know if the Lord went, you're all going to have different languages. But it sounds to me, what Josephus is saying, that there was a few of them that had similar languages and they all sort of went off and basically spread out from there. They couldn't understand each other. The city crumbled. And so everyone sort of moved away to their own areas from that point.
Right. Well, that's awesome. I'm so glad we came back for a part 2 to learn a little bit more about that. And that Josephus and the brother of Jared, that's absolutely knocked me. That is such a great thing. It would be great if you can post a reference for that and then people can check it out themselves. That's a really great thing. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of You Could Hide to Call It podcast. Catch us on Facebook. We're, like Clive mentioned at the start, we're going to be posting these on Facebook. So missionaries who have spoke to us that can't access YouTube will be able to watch the videos, or we'll be able to watch each episode. Get us on Instagram, get us on YouTube, subscribe to us on YouTube, and we look forward to having these conversations with you. Thanks for tuning in. Next week, we are talking about Abraham. So we will chat then.